Welcome back, ghouls and goblins, to another edition of Mr. Lewis' Spooky Stories. Again, reading from the Scary Stories Treasury. Let's get going into our next section. Hopefully, you grabbed a nice spot to relax and enjoy the scares. This first scary story for today is called The Viper. A widow lived alone on the top floor of an apartment house. One morning, her telephone rang. "Hello," she said. "This is the Viper," a man said. "I'm coming up." Somebody is fooling around, she thought, and hung up. A half hour later, the telephone rang again. It was the same man. "It's the Viper," he said. "I'll be up soon." The widow didn't know what to think, but she was getting frightened. Once more, the telephone rang. Again, it was the Viper. "I'm coming up now," he said. She quickly called the police. They said they would be right over. When the doorbell rang, she sighed with relief. Here they are, she thought. But when she opened the door, there stood a little old man with a bucket and a cloth. "I am the Viper," he said. "I wish to wash and wipe the windows." This spooky story is called The Attic. A man named Rupert lived with his dog in a house deep in the woods. Rupert was a hunter and a trapper. The dog was a big German shepherd named Sam. Rupert had raised Sam from a pup. Almost every morning, Rupert went hunting, and Sam stayed behind and guarded the house. One morning, as Rupert was checking his traps, he got the feeling that something was wrong at home. He hurried back as fast as he could, but when he got there, he found that Sam was missing. He searched the house and the woods nearby, but Sam was nowhere to be seen. He called and called, but the dog did not answer. For days, Rupert looked for Sam, but he could find no trace of him. Finally, he gave up and went back to his work. But one morning, he heard something moving in the attic. He picked up his gun. Then he thought, I'd better be quiet about this. So he took off his boots, and in his bare feet he began to climb the attic stairs. He slowly took one step, and then another, until he reached the attic door. He stood outside listening, but he didn't hear a thing. He opened the door, and ah! And some of you might be wondering why he screamed. Well, I'll tell you, you would have screamed too if you stepped on a nail with your bare foot. Ha ha ha. This next one is a quick poem called The Slithery D. The slithery D, he came out of the sea. He ate all the others, but he didn't eat me. The slithery D, he came out of the sea. He ate all the others, but he didn't eat slurp. The next story is Aaron Kelly's Bones. Aaron Kelly was dead. They bought him a coffin and had a funeral and buried him. But that night he got out of his coffin, and he came home. His family was sitting around the fire when he walked in. He sat down next to his widow and he said, "What's going on? You all act like somebody died. Who's dead?" His widow said, "You are." "I don't feel dead," he said. "I feel fine." "You don't look fine," his widow said. "You look dead. You better get back to the grave where you belong." "I'm not going back to the grave until I feel dead," he said. Since Aaron wouldn't go back, his widow couldn't collect his life insurance. Without that, she couldn't pay for the coffin, and the undertaker said he would take it back. Aaron didn't care. He just sat by the fire, rocking in a chair and warming his hands and feet. But his joints were dry, and his back was stiff, and every time he moved, he creaked and cracked. One night, the best fiddler in town came to court the widow. Since Aaron was dead, the fiddler wanted to marry her. The two of them sat on one side of the fire, and Aaron sat on the other side, creaking and cracking. "How long do we have to put up with this dead corpse?" the widow asked. "Something must be done," the fiddler said. "This isn't very jolly," Aaron said. "Let's dance." The fiddler got out his fiddle and began to play. Aaron stretched himself, shook himself, got up, took a step or two, and began to dance. With his old bold bones rattling and his yellow teeth snapping and his bald head wagging, and his arms flip-flopping around, and around he went. With his long legs clicking and his knee bones knocking, he skipped and pranced around the room. How that dead man danced! But pretty soon a bone worked loose and fell to the floor. "Look at that," said the fiddler. "Play faster," said the widow. The fiddler played faster. Crickety-crack, down and back, the dead man went hopping, and his dry bones kept dropping. This way, that way, the pieces just kept popping. "Play, man, play," cried the widow. The fiddler fiddled, and then Aaron danced. Then Aaron fell apart, collapsed into a pile of bones, all except his bald head bone that grinned at the fiddler, cracked its teeth, and kept dancing. "Look at that," groaned the fiddler. "Play louder," cried the widow. "Ho, ho," said the head bone. "Ain't we having fun?" The fiddler couldn't stand it. "Widow," he said, "I'm going home." And he never came back. The family gathered up Aaron's bones and put them back in the coffin. They mixed them up so they couldn't fit back together. After that, Aaron stayed in his grave. But his widow never did get married again. Aaron had seen to that. This next story is called Wait Till Martin Comes. An old man was out for a walk. When a storm came up, he looked for a place to take shelter. Soon he came to an old house. He ran up on the porch and knocked on the door, but nobody answered. By now, rain was pouring down, thunder was booming, and lightning was flashing. So he tried the door. When he found it was unlocked, he went inside. Except for a pile of wooden boxes, the house was empty. He broke up some of the boxes and made a fire with them. Then he sat down in front of the fire and dried himself. It was so warm and cozy that he fell asleep. When he woke up, a black cat was sitting next to the fire. It stared at him for a while. Then it purred. "That's a nice cat," he thought, and he dozed off again. When he opened his eyes, there was a second cat in the room, but this one was as big as a wolf. It looked at him very closely, and it asked, "Shall we do it now?" "No," said the other cat. "Let's wait until Martin comes." "I must be dreaming," thought the old man. He closed his eyes again. Then he took another look, but now there was a third cat in the room, and this one was as big as a tiger. It looked the old man over, and it asked, "Shall we do it now?" "No," said the others. "Let's wait till Martin comes." The old man jumped out the window, and started running. "When Martin comes, you tell him I couldn't wait," he called. The next spooky story is titled The Ghost with the Bloody Fingers. A businessman arrived at a hotel late one night and asked for a room. The room clerk told him the hotel was all filled up. "There is only one empty room," he said, "but we don't rent that room because it's haunted." "I'll take it," said the businessman. "I don't believe in ghosts." The man went up to the room. He unpacked his things, and he went to bed. As soon as he did, a ghost came out of the closet. Its fingers were bleeding, and it was moaning, "Bloody fingers, bloody fingers." When the man saw the ghost, he grabbed his things and ran. The next night, a woman arrived very late. Again, all the rooms were taken except the haunted room. "I'll sleep here," she said. "I'm not afraid of ghosts." As soon as she got into bed, the ghost came out of the closet. Its fingers were still bleeding. It was still moaning, "Bloody fingers, bloody fingers." And the woman took one look and ran. A week later, another guest arrived very late. He also took the haunted room. After he unpacked, he got out his guitar and began to play. Soon the ghost appeared. As before, its fingers were bleeding, and it was moaning, "Bloody fingers, bloody fingers." The man paid no attention. He just kept strumming his guitar, but the ghost kept moaning, and its fingers kept bleeding. Finally, the guitar player looked up. "Cool it, man," he said. "Get yourself a Band-Aid." And our last story for today is The Walk. My uncle was walking down a lonely dirt road one day. He came upon a man who was also walking down that road. The man looked at my uncle, and my uncle looked at the man. The man was scared of my uncle, and my uncle was scared of that man. But they kept on walking, and it began to get dark. The man looked at my uncle, and my uncle looked at the man. The man was very scared of my uncle, and my uncle was very scared of that man. But they kept on walking, and they came to a big woods. It was getting darker, and the man looked at my uncle, and my uncle looked at the man. The man was really scared of my uncle, and my uncle was really scared of that man. But they kept on walking, and deep down into the woods they went. It was getting darker, and the man looked at my uncle, and my uncle looked at the man. The man was terribly scared of my uncle, and my uncle was terribly scared of... Did I get you? I hope so. Anyway, friends, this is the end of this section of our Spooky Stories Treasury. As for me, I'm Mr. Lures. I might go carve a pumpkin, and we'll see you next time, friends. Have a good night.